There's a huge problem that I see most investors making, and it's to do with the important decision you make right at the start of your investing journey. This problem happens without you even realizing it, and it could be costing you tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds. So let me tell you what this problem is and exactly how to rectify it to get you on the right track. Okay, so what is this problem? Well, it's a fact that if you're watching this video, you're probably investing using an ISA, an individual savings account. Now you might wonder, why in the world would this be wrong? For the most part, ISAs are flexible now, meaning you can easily move money in and out of them without it affecting your allowance. And you can now open and pay into multiple ISAs into a year, which was a huge problem previously. And it's tax-free, which means all of the money within there grows tax-free and the government can't touch it. Well, unfortunately, this is technically correct, but it's actually the wrong way to think about it. And I'm going to show you why. Now, to understand this, we need to go right back to the beginning of your investing journey, because this is where the problem starts. The actual problem starts with the fact we have so little knowledge about investing. We aren't taught in school, and it's definitely not something that's easily shared. So when someone tells you how to invest, the conversation will usually go something along the lines of, well, you need to open a stocks and shares ISA, then buy stocks or ETFs, which, don't get me wrong, is brilliant advice and a great place for everyone to start. And it's where I started, but it was a big mistake, because a conversation shouldn't lead in this way. The real first step is, well, what's your goal? Let's work out what type of account you need. That's what's actually going to get you to your end goal the quickest, because choosing the wrong account type, you're basically shooting yourself in the foot before you even get started. And I will state here, I'm not talking about your generic financial advice. I'll assume you know before you get started investing, you should tackle high interest debts, excluding your mortgage, and have built up an emergency fund so you're in the position to invest in the first place. So we can address this as I'm ready to invest. Now, what should I do? Now, two people can invest the same amount. They can start on the same day, and yet one will end up with tens of thousands more. And the difference is they picked the right account first. And that's what we're about to work out, and number 4 will likely surprise you. Okay, now typically, the order people assume investing goes is this. You open an ISA, and then you invest. But what they don't realize is you've got these other accounts here which also exist, which offer you financial benefits that push the ISA way down the pecking order. So I want to break down these in order, and I'll start with the most important and how you should be using them so you can get your money in the right place to work the best for you. Now, the first place you should be investing is your workplace pension. When people tell me they've opted out of their workplace pension, I shriek in horror because it's so powerful. And that's honestly what makes a huge difference between someone who's employed and someone who's self-employed like me. If you've got a workplace pension and your employer matches your contributions, that's free money. Not eventually free money, or if the markets do well, it's free money, instant, no risk return before you've even started investing. Now, stage 1 is the legal minimum. So by law, the total minimum going into your workplace pension is 8% of your qualifying earnings. That's at least 3% from your employer and 5% from you. That 5% isn't all from you, 4% comes from you, and 1% comes from basic rate tax relief that the government adds automatically. Qualifying earnings for the current tax year are a slice of your pay between £6,240 and £50,270. So on a £30,000 salary, your qualifying earnings are £23,760. Now, at the legal minimum, you put in £99 a month into your pension pot, but it only costs you £79.20 because of your tax relief. Your employer adds £59.40 each month, making a total of £158.40 going into your pension every month. Now, if you invested just your £79.20 in the ISA at 7% returns, well, after 20 years, you'd have £41,250. And after 30 years, you'd have £96,600. On the other hand, in a pension, that £158.40 a month at 5% returns would grow to about $65,100 after 20 years and around $131,800 after 30 years. So even with the lower return, the pension comes out ahead because more is going in from day one. We say this because typically your workplace pension will underperform your ISA if we assume an average return of 7%. Of course, that's not guaranteed, it could change. So if your pension achieved that same 7% returns as the ISA, after 20 years you'd have around £82,500, and after 30 years you'd have roughly £93,200. So in that case, the pension is ahead by £35,200 with lower returns and about £96,600 if the returns match. For high rate taxpayers, it's even more impressive because the monthly out-of-pocket cost is still £79.20, but you can reclaim another 20% tax relief on your contributions. If you put that extra back into your pension, you're now investing £178.20 a month instead of £158.40. With that higher amount, after 20 years at 7% returns, you would have £92,800, and after 30 years, you would have £217,400, compared to the same £79.20 per month going into the ISA. Pension is ahead by about £51,700 at 5% returns, and by £120,800 at 70% returns after 30 years. That's over 6 figures extra in your pocket. Now, let's look at true matching. So this is where your employer matches what you put in. This is huge and a massive thing to look out for when you're looking for a job. Now, this can typically go up to 10%, but let's go for somewhere in the middle and assume 6%. On the same £30,000 salary, you would be putting in £118.80 per month into the pot. The cost to you is going to be £93.04, but your employer would also put in the £118 a month. So that's £237.60 per month going into your pension. If you invested the same £95 per month into an ISA at 7% returns, after 20 years you'd have £49,500, and after 30 years you'd have £115,900. If we invested that £237 per month at 5% returns, this is how much it would grow to. Now, if the pension again achieved the 7% returns, this is how much you would see. After 30 years, that's about £81,800 more at 5% returns, or £173,900 more if returns match, which is staggering. If we look at how the same figures work but for a higher rate taxpayer, here's the numbers right here, because you're claiming that extra 20% tax relief, and let's assume you're going to reinvest that. So the numbers are right here. On the higher return, so 7% over 30 years, that's a £202,900 difference. That's over £200,000 difference, which is insane. If you are a higher earner, it's a no-brainer to salary sacrifice your high rate income. So let's say you earn £70,000 and you salary sacrifice enough to bring your taxable income down to the higher rate threshold of £50,270. That's £19,730 going straight into your pension before tax, avoiding the 40% tax hit entirely, and you're saving on national insurance too. If you did that every year for 20 years at 7% returns, you would be looking at around £812,000 just from the sacrifice higher rate income before counting your regular contributions or any employer match. That's the difference between a nice bump and life-changing money. So whether you're on basic rate or higher rate, the numbers don't lie. Your workplace pension smokes the ISA out of the water. And this is what most people miss. Your workplace pension is still investing. It's all invested in the stock market, so you're probably investing without even realizing, and you might have done for years. So without a doubt, you should be matching what your employer pays in. That's step number one. Now, the next account, and what you might even be able to get your employer to pay into to give you more control, is a SIP. Now, this is similar to a workplace pension, but you don't get the match. We've just seen that your employer matches to your pension contribution. Nothing beats it. That's instant, no risk growth before you even touch the stock market. But what if you've maxed your match, or you're self-employed and you don't get one at all? That's where a SIP, a self-invested personal pension, comes in. Think of it as your own personal version of your workplace pension, but with full control over where your money's invested. The tax relief works exactly the same as for a workplace pension. For every £80 you put in, the government will top it up to £100 instantly. And if you're a higher rate taxpayer, you can claim back another 20% through your tax return, which is effectively turning £60 of take-home pay into £100 in your pension. And here's a big one, because the pension annual allowance is £60,000. That's 3 times more than an ISA, so it's perfect if you're self-employed, or you have no employer match, or you just want to put away more than what the ISA limit allows. Let's say you can afford to put away £500 a month from your take-home pay. If you put that into a stocks and shares ISA, it's simple. Like £500 goes in every month, there's no tax relief, and it grows tax-free. Now with the pension, it works differently. That same £500 take-home pay could turn into £625 a month in a SIP if you're a basic rate taxpayer, because you get a 20% relief added back in. And if you're a higher rate taxpayer, it jumps up to £833 a month for every £500 thanks to the 40% relief. That's before you've even invested. You're starting from a bigger base on day one. And just so we're clear, I am ignoring national insurance savings here. So if you do use salary sacrifice, especially is a high rate earner, the numbers get even bigger. So let's run the numbers over 30 years at 7% returns. So with the ISA, your £500 a month would grow to about £609,985. Now with the basic rate SIP, where £625 is going in each month, you would end up with roughly £761,984 before tax. And with a higher rate, where £833 is going in each month, you'd be looking at £1,015,996 before tax. But yes, I can already hear what you're shouting through the screen. Pensions are taxed when you take the money out. And you're right. But remember, 25% of your pension can be taken completely tax-free, and the rest is usually taxed at basic rate tax for most retirees. Unless you're taking more than £50,000 a year in retirement, remember tax bands will likely move up over time. So here's what that means after tax. The ISA stays at $609,985 because it's all tax-free. The basic rate SIP works out to be $647,686 spendable after taking 25% tax-free and paying 20% tax on the rest. The higher rate SIP comes in at $863,597 spendable after doing the same. So even after tax, the basic rate SIP is around £69,700 ahead of the ISA, and the higher rate SIP is a massive £253,600 ahead, and that's without touching the NI savings. And not to mention there's certain benefits with a pension when you're passing things on to your partner that you won't get with an ISA. And this is a part that a lot of people miss. With a pension, you're starting with a much bigger contribution. That bigger monthly amount starts compounding harder over the decades, so even after tax paid on the way out, you still end up way ahead. And the way you really need to think about it, which people just ignore completely, is you have to decide when you want to pay the tax. So you earn your salary from work, and let's say you want to put it into an ISA. Well, you're actually not completely tax-free because you've already paid the tax. So you have to pay the tax on your income and then put it into the ISA. Well, instead you could say, I'll put the money in the pension and I'll leave the tax bill to the end. And in that way, you're taking advantage of the government and you're compounding that tax money, and then you're paying the tax at the end. I know it's a bit of a weird way to think about it, but think about it that if you put money into a SIP, it's tax-free now. The money you're putting into an ISA, you have already paid the tax on. So think about it in that way and it'll make it a lot easier. So here's the order so far. First, you want to match your workplace pension, and second, use a SIP, especially if you're self-employed. You want more control, or your workplace scheme is a high-fee dinosaur. Now, workplace pensions and SIPs are unbeatable for retirement, but what if your next big goal isn't to retire, and it's maybe a house? Well, if buying a house is on the cards, especially if it's your first one, you might want to split your focus. There's an account that still gives you free money like a pension, but you can pull it out penalty-free to buy your first home, and that's the Lifetime ISA. Now, there's two ways that you can use it, which people don't realize. The first is to put it towards your home, up to the value of £450,000, and you can access it whenever you buy. The second is to keep it for retirement and take it out at 60 completely tax-free. You can put in up to £4,000 a year, which works out to be about £333 a month. And the government adds 25% on top, so up to £1,000 of free money every single year tax-free. Now you can invest it like stocks and shares ISA, or you can keep it in cash, and everything inside grows tax-free. Now the catch is if you take it out for anything else, you lose the bonus and you pay a penalty, which means you actually end up with less than what you put in. And the one thing that people often miss is even if you've already used a Lifetime ISA for your first home, you can open another one towards your retirement. So it's worth sticking £1 in before you turn 40 just to keep the option alive, because after 40 you can't open one, though you can keep contributing until you're 50. Now let's compare this to a regular ISA if you're using it purely for retirement. So let's say you start at 35 and you pay in for 15 years. Then at 50, as the rule states, you stop adding money, but you let it grow until 60. Using the same 7% return assumption for both, the regular ISA would grow to around £212,000, and the Lifetime ISA with the 25% bonus on every contribution would end up at around £265,000. That's about £53,000 more just for opening the right account. But how does it compare to a pension? Well, let's say you put the same monthly amount into a SIP at the same time frame and the same returns. For a basic rate taxpayer, the SIP would match the Lifetime ISA in terms of the pre-tax pot, because the 20% tax relief has a similar effect to the 25% LISA bonus. The difference is that pensions are taxed when you take the money out, with 25% taken tax-free and the rest taxed at 20%. That basic rate SIP would leave you with around £226,000 to spend, which means the Lifetime ISA actually comes out ahead after tax at £265,000 £65,000. But if you're a higher rate taxpayer, the SIP really starts to shine. With a 40% tax relief on the way in, the pre-tax pot would grow to around £354,000, and after taking out the tax on it, you would have around £301,000 to spend. That's a clear winner over the lifetime ISA in that case. So who's this actually good for? Well, if you're on the basic rate and you want money you can access at 60 or sooner if you're buying your first home, a lifetime ISA can actually beat a basic rate SIP for after tax for the same monthly contribution. And it's all tax-free at withdrawal. If you're on the higher rate, a SIP will almost always win for retirement, even after tax. And that's before you factor in any NI savings from salary sacrifice. If you need to put away more than £4,000 a year, the SIP's £60,000 annual allowance completely blows the lifetime ISA out of the water. But you could even consider filling that first before you go for the SIP. So now it's the ISA, right? Well, there's actually one more account you might want to consider before jumping straight into a stocks and shares ISA, and that is a cash ISA. I know you're probably surprised to hear me say that, but there's a specific scenario where it makes sense, and it's to do with short-term money that you might be holding. If you've got cash you'll need in the next few months or years, maybe for a holiday, a big purchase, or just as a safety buffer, then you should still consider keeping it in a cash ISA, and here's why. ISAs are now flexible, which means you can move money in and out without leaving your allowance. But with a stocks and shares ISA, any uninvested cash is often automatically swept into what's called a money market fund. Now, money market funds are designed to be very low risk, but it's not the same as having your cash sat in a bank account. The big difference is protection. So cash in a bank or in a cash ISA is covered by the FSCS, the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, for up to £85,000 per institution. If the bank fails, you're covered, but cash in a money market fund isn't covered in the same way because technically it's an investment product and not a deposit. Personally, I think money market funds are still very low risk and I use them, but you should know the difference before parking large sums in there. And not all money market funds are created equal. Some invest in ultra-short UK government bonds and top-rated corporate debt, which are about as safe as it gets, while others stretch further for yield and take on a bit more risk. So sometimes you don't want to just go for the highest number. The flip side is some money market funds will actually pay a better rate than the cash ISAs on the market. They're classed as low-risk investments rather than saving products, so the trade-off is a bit of yield for a tiny bit of extra risk. Now personally, I'm fine with that, and I keep some of my short-term cash in money market funds, but if you want absolutely zero investment risk and FSCS protection, a cash ISA is a safer bet. Now, not all money market funds are created equally, and it's important you go with a trusted provider. If you want a really solid option, I would recommend Lightyear. Their money market fund is one of the strongest I've seen and it offers competitive rates. But remember, money market funds are investments and they do carry risks. You can move money in and out easily and it's managed through a clean, easy to use app, plus they've removed order fees when you move cash into investments later. So you're not getting stung from switching to cash to bonds or ETFs in their commission-free stocks and shares ISA. Fund manager and FX fees may still apply. And it's not just the money market funds. Lightyear's been making big moves lately and they've just raised $23 million in Series B funding and hit $1 billion in customer assets. They've released some insane features, powered features like Why Did It Move, which explains the price jumps and dips instantly, and Bulls Say and Bears Say, which breaks down both sides of an investment case so you can make better calls. But here's the key point, their money market fund sits right along their stocks and shares ISA, so you can easily hold your short-term cash in the money market fund and then shift it straight into your ISA when you're ready to invest. You can get up to £100 worth of a US fractional share in your general investment account, and you can see more details in the description below. But do remember, all investments carry risks and your money can go up as well as down. And that brings me onto the next account in our ranking. In 5th place is our beloved ISA. Now, if you have an ISA, don't panic. There's nothing wrong with having one, and it's an amazing account with huge benefits. After all, the gains are tax-free. The whole point of this video is to show you why you might not want to use your ISA first. It's about careful tax planning and making your money work harder by using the right accounts in the right order. For example, I used to think my ISA was a key to early retirement, but once I realized how many extra benefits I could get from other accounts like the pensions and lifetime ISAs, I started spreading my money across them instead. I still use my ISA, but they are my main priority. That way I can take advantage of every £3 tax break and other bonuses available without locking all my future wealth into just one account. So that's the order I would use, and you can hopefully now see why diving just straight into an ISA isn't always the smartest move. If you want to keep building on this, I've got 2 videos that will pair perfectly with what we just covered. The first one is how how I personally plan to retire 10 plus years early, and I'll walk you through my exact strategy, numbers, and thinking behind my plan. And if you want to understand more about why a pension changes everything in retirement, this video will also help. It's going to make the pension section of this video click even harder. Both will be super helpful for you, and I will catch you over there. Thanks.